I see a widening crack in the eyes. It sends a shudder through my spine. My mentally ill, drunk mother and I stand in the middle of a partially frozen lake. She squeals with joy, oblivious to the danger. I guide her off the ice to the shore, like any sensible adult would do, right? However, I'm 9 years old. Happiness is beneficial for the body, but it is grief that really empowers the mind. My mother struggled with her mental health until she ended her life. As a child, this made me determined to follow the light of mental health instead of the darkness of mental illness. Adversity became my ally in building mental resilience. Whilst growing up, I continued to be confronted with the A to Z of mental illnesses. Unwillingly, I learned more about what makes people with amazing potential, like my mother, miserable. What I wanted to learn instead was what made people function at a high level. What started as a coping strategy that kept me sane whilst my circumstances were not, turned into a full-blown love affair with the research behind what builds mental resilience and enhances performance. I found answers nestled in the space between our ears, in the small and mighty brain. Instead of learning how to cope, I started to explore how to thrive. I turned this knowledge into mental tools, and I realized the strategies that help me to keep my head above water whilst being in danger of drowning also enabled me to really excel in the goals that I pursued. Thanks to contemporary research, I've since learned more about why these strategies helped me back then. I would like to share 3 tools out of my toolbox of high-performance mental habits with you tonight, which I had the privilege of collecting thanks to the experiences I've had. They show us that nobody is broken and that we are enabling ourselves, if we want to build the brains we want. Tool number 1, reframe your circumstances. The term cognitive reframing describes the conscious effort to identify negative thinking patterns, flip them, and give them a new, more helpful meaning. To give you an example, let's fast forward 25 years. These days, my husband and I mostly have first world problems. Jan recently came back from a business trip to Beijing. He had seen the wall of China. He had eaten amazing dishes. And still, he wasn't raving about it. Instead, he was sitting in front of me saying, "You know what? I feel super exhausted and I'm actually quite disappointed." This had been the 3rd long-haul trip within the last 4 weeks. He had been to Entebbe, Africa, and Dubai just before that. He told me that he regretted missing almost a full month of my first pregnancy. We allowed ourselves to complain for 5 solid minutes. Then we switched into reframing gear. We talked about what he had most enjoyed, what he had been grateful for during the last 7 days, and what the highlights of his trips had been. I really hope that there will be many more first world problems just like that one. But I also know that by making reframing a constant mental habit that we practice, we will be able to cope, not only with daily little challenges, but also bigger challenges, like when illness strikes and family deaths occur, which is all part of the human experience. Aaron Hansen. What if I fall? Oh, darling, what if you fly? I hear footsteps behind me. Somebody pulls me back. A punch to my face. I tumble to the ground. I'm only half conscious now. Hands close around my throat. That night, I survived the attack. After this incident, though, the way I experienced my surroundings had changed. I would wince when somebody approached me from behind, when a voice was raised, when a door banged into its hinges. I reached into my high-performance habit toolbox, the one I had been putting together for decades now, only to realize that I had not yet obtained a tool that could assist me in this situation. I did not want to turn into a survivor. Instead, I wanted to continue to thrive, like I had before the attack, living in the world's most amazing places and pursuing a career I felt deeply passionate about. To make that happen, I needed to find a way to actively train myself out of this new sense of anxiety that I was experiencing. Our brain's neuroplasticity, its ability to form new connections, and enables learning from new experiences, in this instance, caused me to become anxious of things I had not been afraid of before this attack. Have you ever seen what it looks like when a new neural pathway is being created in the brain? No? I brought a highly scientific tool to demonstrate. In my brain, this is what the new connection of the new sense of anxiety looked like, forming a connection where previously there had been none. Oops. Now my brain needed to create alternative neural pathways again that would lead to a different, anxiety-free response. Researching how astronauts learn to deal with life-threatening situations and eliminate their automatic fear response gave me hope. I understood the process was reversible, and I was determined to train myself out of this new sense of anxiety. Instead of getting a prescription for anti-anxiety meds to prevent my decline, I got myself an anti-anxiety animal, my dog Georgie, to cheer me up. On a cognitive level, I began to make myself aware of stimuli that triggered the anxiety, and I consciously looked for evidence to show me that it was non-threatening. This is how I learned to interpret them differently again. I made neuroplasticity my friend. Our brain has the capacity to form new mental pathways throughout our entire lives. I reminded myself again and again that over time, my brain would allow me to alter my perception. I slowly but surely stopped scanning my surroundings for danger and instead started to look for opportunities again. This sums up tool number 2. Differentiate between stimulus and response. Thankfully, the things I feel anxious about these days have nothing to do with being physically unsafe anymore. Instead, I catch myself worrying about things like responding to emails in a timely fashion, being late, not wearing matching tights. I use the same tool that enabled me to train my brain out of the constant fear response I used to experience, I make myself aware of the stimuli, the late email, the wrongly colored tights, and consciously change my response from worrying into one that is solution-focused. Thanks to our evolutionary inherited negativity bias, our visceral tendency to interpret stimuli negatively, turning worrying into a constant hobby, is an easy trap to fall into. But because of our plastic and flexible brain structure, we can learn to substitute mindless worrying and instead fill up the space with high-performance mental habits like solution-focused thinking styles, for instance, effectively building the brain we want. Maya Angelou said it beautifully. As I know better, I do better. Jan and I are holidaying in Fiji. The weather declines suddenly. The loudspeaker is crackling. I turn up the volume. We hear. We are experiencing the most severe cyclone in the history of our country. If you're not in an underground shelter right now, we will be praying for your souls. May God be with. The energy cuts off. When Jan and I found ourselves in this surreal situation in 2016, we realized how far we had come in terms of establishing high-performance mental habits. The more primitive parts of our brains that make the snap judgment, fight, flight, freeze, and normally take over in these kind of super extreme situations, simply remained on standby. This enabled us to stay in charge of our rational brains. So, we wrapped our passports in plastic and taped them to ourselves. We packed an emergency bag. We put a mattress against the window. We sealed off the toilet. That's where the sewage runs in first when water levels rise rapidly. And then, with nothing else to do, except ignoring the howling winds, we played cards. The cyclone passed, causing tremendous damage to the islands that night. Jan and I remained unharmed, both physically, but also psychologically. The reason why we were able to respond so rationally in this extreme situation is because the final tool I'll be sharing with you tonight has become a way of life to us. Tool number 3, actively pursue mental well-being. This is the conscious effort to seek out the best possible wellness program for your mind. It is an ongoing commitment to actively strengthening your brain by building express highways of high-performance mental habits. It's similar to having an amazingly nutritious diet, but not to make your bum look good, but to make your brain look good. My personal Wellness for the Mind program consists of these 3. I constantly find ways to laugh out loud in order to have endorphins rushing through my bloodstreams. I travel to expand my perspective and my comfort zone. So I do admit, in the case of Fiji, that didn't quite work out. And finally, my dogs. 2 oxytocin-inducing creatures that fight off the stress hormone cortisol on my behalf. What does your Wellness for the Mind program look like? How can you expand it? How can you make sure to turn it into a daily habit? These habits are such great investment of our time. They give us capacity to cope with extremely stressful situations when they arise, but also provide us with resources to meet everyday challenges and excel at them. I continue to be dedicated to the exploration of what makes people thrive. I'm in awe of what the human spirit can accomplish with access to guidance, ongoing research, and latest advances in behavioral science and positive psychology. I know what some of you might be thinking, listening to parts of my story. You might not have had the privilege of trauma. Don't worry, there's still hope. If these tools have helped me, astronauts and others, to overcome life-threatening situations, imagine what they can do to enhance everyday performance. Let's practice high-performance mental habits together. Let's build the brains we want. So as individuals and as society, we become ever more resilient. It's time to thrive. Thank you.